heavy. Good morning and a warm welcome to you all to the meeting today. In common with our principles of democratic services, this meeting is being streamed in public. We may, in this case, have to do it by recording. So may I take the opportunity to welcome and thank those of you who are joining us in that way. The Operational Review Committee includes a number of authority members as follows. Elected members appointed by Pembrokeshire County Council, Councillor Dr. Simon Hancock, Councillor Rhys Jordan, who is Vice Chair of this committee, Councillor Peter Morgan, who has been recovering from illness, and I'm not sure he's going to be with us today, Councillor Tony Wilcox, Councillor Michelle Wiggins, and Councillor Chris Williams. The members appointed by the Welsh Government are Mrs. Julie James, Mr. Gwyn Angell Jones, and myself, Dr. Rosie Plummer, as Chair. We're also joined and supported by a cast of able officers, some of whom are presenting reports for us or are in attendance to support. With us today, Chief Exec Tegwyn Jones, I think possibly the Director of Placemaking, Decarbonisation and Engagement, Sarah Morris, Director of Nature and Tourism, James Parkin, who may come in and come out according to the agenda. And as ever, a number of officers who will be presenting their excellent reports to us. Thomas Jones, Community Archaeologist, Maya Thomas, our Performance and Compliance Coordinator, and Jamie Taylor, who is our Dark Skies Officer. Plus, of course, the support from our dream duo of Caroline Llewellyn and Georgia Jones, the Democratic Services team. Depending on progress, we'll aim to take a short comfort break at some point during the proceedings, which is important for everyone, but especially so to our Democratic Services team who hack the keyboards and make sure all the systems are as operative as they're willing to be. Now, Adini Brana di Dechrau, if we're now all ready to start, which it looks as if we are, we'll go on to item 3, which is the apologies, please, Caroline.
So I've received apologies from Mrs. Julie James. As you say, I'm not certain whether Councillor Morgan will be joining us, but apart from that, all others are present.
Yeah, I thought I saw apologies from Tegwyn Jones flash across my screen. It may be because he's got to depart somewhere or he's got a doppelganger. Okay, and item 4 on to disclosures. I've got a number of standard disclosures myself, so I'll make those first. Personal, not prejudicial. I'm an NRW board member. I also chair its Protected Areas Committee, which has relevance to parts of the reports today. I'm a trustee of Plant Life. And because I'm a member of the Welsh Mill Society with particular heritage involvement, that has some relationship to report 0124. Now, can I ask if anybody else has any disclosures in respect of items on this agenda? Okay, not seeing any hands. So it looks as if we're ready to go on to the minutes. And the minutes are from the 6th of December, which Christmas seems a heck of a long time ago, and now it's nearly Easter. Impossible. Can I just say that in my experience, the minutes we get from our Democratic Services team are consistently amongst the best I've known in a very long professional career of boards and committees. So thank you again to the support team. I've only picked up one item myself, which is item 7, paragraph 2, the last sentence. There's a big, which I think needs clarifying or checking, but nothing else. And I'm sorry, I should have flagged that to you, Caroline. Rhys, do you have any, you have something?
No, thank you, Chair. I was just happy to second the minutes. I assume you've moved them, yeah.
I'm happy to move them if that's allowable. I'm not sure. Can I as chair move them? Okay, everybody's nodding. Yeah. There you are.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you very much. Moved and Vice Chair Rhys has seconded. Thank you very much. On to the action log. 3 items here completed. Excellent. Thank you to the Democratic Services team again for the very clear way those are worded in the action log. It means you don't have to remember what it's referring to. It's really clear. There are 3 actions that are ongoing, all of which seem fine as far as I can see. Action 955, could we ask that the September presentation also includes e-bikes since that seems to be kind of the same general flavour, it's about e-charging. So it just felt to me it might be reasonable to include that, a suggestion rather than a direction from me. Everybody else happy with the action log? Thank you, that's great. So without more ado, drum roll for Thomas onto the stage. Thomas, the community archaeologist. This is a report on the archaeology work for the financial year 22-23, set in the context of the action plan for 22-24 and the other authority plans. And as ever, we welcome the in-depth report that Thomas has prepared for us, which we're asked to receive and comment on. And before that, we'll invite Thomas to introduce and highlight any particular elements, given PCNPA's extensive and diverse heritage assemblage, 11,000 features, 300 scheduled monuments. Wow. Reviewing that could take us weeks, and we're time constrained today. So I think that's the hint, Thomas, an introduction and a highlight, but we've read the presentation, of course. Thank you, and the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Yeah, there is a lot of heritage in the National Park. Not saying there isn't outside the National Park, but there's a lot. So yeah, hopefully I try to do what I can for the National Park and try to kind of be a champion of the heritage. The first thing I should say, and you highlighted the financial years relating to, apologies that I wasn't able to attend with Sarah Mellor, because normally we tend to report at the same time. Unfortunately, it just got very, very busy last year, which is always the case. So unfortunately, that's why there was a delay. Hopefully, this year it won't be quite as long. So hopefully, I'll be able to come back at the end of this year. As a kind of compromise, I did put in stuff we've been doing in this current financial year, which hopefully has been useful. And we can potentially in future we can develop the report in a way that we look more long-term or medium-term as well. So that's something that I'm happy to go away and kind of explore how we can do that. Yeah, so just hopefully you've all had a chance to read it and found it very informative. Rosie's kind of summarised really well there, but just to highlight, the report is just indicating how archaeology fits into the management plan, the corporate resources plan, and the well-being objectives. And I have to thank Maya for her help on that. She's very good at pulling out the stats. Just the archaeology action plan, which will come to an end at the end of this year, 2024, I should say, rather than the financial year. But essentially, we've got those two key areas. We've got the community and public engagement, and hopefully I've highlighted the key areas under there. So Heritage Guardians, so our work with schools, lots of projects. So obviously Dawnshaugh Dibbins, the LIDAR, interpretation, Cherish, Plant, Cupat, Ancient Connections. So there's lots of different projects going on, and they vary depending on where those projects are in their life cycle. Archaeology Day, which was again successful, not last year, the year before, obviously for this report, and then guided walks, talks, and obviously some media engagement as well to raise the profile where they have queries about things we've raised as issues. And then sort of the second part is obviously the safeguarding or the conservation element, and that's all around things like the monitoring work of our heritage volunteers. They do a brilliant job. We've got a really dedicated group there, and that is bringing in lots of data, and we're able to use that. Hopefully you saw all the different sites we've done work on as well, and that all comes mostly from that information as well. Things like Heritage Watch, again, reporting, doing some training with different organisations, and raising the public profile, and obviously carrying out some conservation work. Again, lots of input from our volunteers and other stakeholders. And then supporting things like excavations. So we've got Porth Row, which was a fantastic one. The whole roundhouse was excavated. Obviously, it's a promontory fort, and it's at risk of coastal erosion as a result of things like climate change. So just highlighting that we've got a lot of heritage which is really vulnerable to being lost, and really the only thing we can do is actually recover as much information or record before those changes have happened. Again, Ancient Connections, so they did a excavation as part of their project. So I helped support the tendering to get a contractor in for that. So providing support. Again, sort of kind of cuts across the safeguarding the LiDAR project, which hopefully in the long term, it will enhance our records. So we'll have a better way of managing.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Really good summary. I mean, it is very helpful reminder of the role of archaeology in the PCMPA, the National Park Management Plan, the corporate plan, the wellbeing objectives, the way it intersects across. It's a really clear articulation in the report of our archaeology action plan priorities. And I think some tremendous cameo descriptions and images of the diverse work that's done with schools and communities, Pembrokeshire College students, citizen scientists and others. So, a demonstration of our officers' energy and how that's particularly successfully harnessed input, energy and collaboration and participation by so many diverse others. So let me throw it open because I know that others of my colleagues are interested particularly in this area too. So let me throw it open before I come on with any other comments. Simon.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with your comments, Rosie. It's a superb report, and thank you, Thomas, for presenting something that's so, in-depth and comprehensive. It was a great read. Just two things I want to ask, really. One of them is, I'm really delighted that the park is still continuing and committed to the annual Archaeology Day. I can't remember how many I've been to in the Pembrokeshire College, but I've been to many, and it really is a wonderful showcase of the park and also engaging in so many sort of diverse audiences. So I know we've got a long-term commitment to that, which is great. And the second thing is slightly negative, I'm afraid. The Heritage Watch. You record in your report, Thomas, 22 incidents of damage. How much of them were deliberate damage, or was it perhaps just recklessness? And I just wondered, you got the Heritage volunteers, which is great, augmenting the meagre resources of the police. Are they well spread around the park, or are they sort of the Heritage Watch volunteers? Are they around the park, or we've just got a few in a particular area?
Okay, so on the Heritage Watch, I think it tends to be a mixture of, some of them are deliberate, and they tend to be potentially linked with other issues, so antisocial behaviour. So we've had some graffiti in certain towns in the national park. So potentially that is linked with other more complex issues. So some of them will be deliberate, but potentially they're not aware that they're damaging heritage. It might be a lack of awareness. And then the others are potentially people visiting things like Bronze Age cairns or other monuments in remote places, and people might not realise that actually they're just rearranging cairns or the stones and not being aware. And that's what we try to do with Heritage Watch, is to raise the public awareness. So in the last financial year, we've done a lot more. We've gone to a lot more events, and we try to highlight heritage crime, what it is, and how people can help. The difficulty is, and it's always a difficulty with this one, is the people who are really passionate about heritage tend to be the people we get to. It's getting to those other groups where the challenge is. So we are trying to do some publicity, and we are working with other stakeholders like CADU, the police, and the Archaeological Trust to try and raise that awareness. But it's a constant battle, really. But like I say, I think with heritage crime, a lot of the times the heritage is the indirect victim of another activity. So particularly when you think of things like graffiti. So on that one, so hopefully, does that sort of answer your question there, Simon?
Yeah, it does. And of course, we have to acknowledge that these heritage crimes, unfortunately, well, it's awful that they take place anyway, but of course they also take place outside the park as well. There was some very significant incident that was given widespread media coverage. In fact, about only 3 or 4 days ago, where a 6th century cross outside Jeffreyston, opposite Jeffreyston School, the sort of slate coffin rest before people went into the church, and that was deliberately vandalized and removed. So unfortunately, crime knows no boundaries, and it happens within and outside the park. So it's just hopefully vigilance and getting the perpetrators held to account is the best way of hopefully stamping it out.
Yeah, and we do work closely with people like the Archaeological Trust and CADU. So anything that's happening outside the National Park, we're happy to post and raise awareness of those issues as well. So yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully that satisfied that one. I was just going to mention quickly about the Heritage Volunteer question around where they basically look after, or they visit, the publicly accessible scheduled monuments across the national park. So we're up to about just under 50%, and actually really positive. Lynn Holston, our ranger for the MOD, she is now monitoring the ones on the range for us. And we went out March. In February, we did some drone surveys. So we've done quite a lot of them, and we're planning to put them on our Sketchfab account so the public can actually engage with them, because obviously Castlemartin Range is not accessible most of the time. So we're trying to find ways to, so that people can access these sites in a digital and more creative way.
That's brilliant. I think the way in which you're sharing those innovations, it's the LiDAR, the digital reconstruction technologies, the artwork, the drone work, it does not only give, as you say, access to some places that are inaccessible, it gives access via different media, and it engages different audiences who have different sort of skills and interests in the way they approach things. Really helpful kind of comments. I absolutely welcome the work on heritage crime, and I think take the points that Simon says. You mentioned, of course, the Archaeological Trust, which, of course, there's been a change in structure of the Archaeological Trusts, that they are now integrated into one Welsh organisation together, collectively. Quite how that will shape over the next few years will be interesting. But I just flag that, given we have the opportunity here, and perhaps you might, once things are settled, like to add a comment into your next report as to how or whether that's changed the way you work or interact. Gwyn.
Yes, just one simple observation and one question. The observation is, if I turn to page 29, there's got a picture there of the Manorbier Dovecot before the scrub had been cleared away and after the scrub has been cleared away. Does it mean possibly that is more obvious a place and becomes focus and the victim of vandalism when we're creating and clearing a place which is obviously not secure? It's not. We haven't got a fence around it. So that's my question: is can it be an indirect consequence to our actions when we clean up a place? We make the archaeological site too obvious. That's just a question. And then on sorry, Mark, that's an observation. The question I had was item 19, the cup hat project. I couldn't work out what cup hats stood for, and so I was it was distracting me from reading other things because I kept on trying to work it out. So tell me now.
Okay, I will put you out of your misery with that one. And unfortunately, that's
I shared that too.
A lot of these projects have these abbreviations, and unfortunately, it would have been very long had I put that in as a title. So it's, as I understand it, it's Coastal Upland Heritage and Tourism Project, which was so it was run by Aberystwyth University, was the lead. I'm just going to make the point, actually, it's really very, very valid point about clearance. So the reason that we like to carry out the scrub clearance, and in this case, the Dovecot is suffering from ivy growth. I think it's back in 2014, I think, or 2016. They did some really good work, redid the lime on the structure, and then unfortunately there wasn't a management plan in place, and the site has started to get the ivy coming back. So in terms of for the structure, for the monument, it is beneficial for us to carry out that work to clear that. And then I think it is a case of, if you don't want to promote it so you're getting more visitors, potentially causing, or you're raising its awareness, what you do is you look at your media strategy. So you might do the conservation work, and then maybe potentially not publicise that you've done that. I'm not aware, and I'm going to jinx myself now, I'm not aware that that particular monument has suffered, heritage crime to date. Hopefully it won't. But yeah, so it's all about, I think, the messaging with these sorts of sites. So you carry out the work and then you work out, do you want to, publicise for those? I mean, we've been working with the National Trust on another site recently, and again, not necessarily for heritage crime, but we've cleared a motte in the west, and we're trying to think, okay, we've cleared this now. People are going to want to walk on that monument. So, we've decided not to promote that work we've done. We'll wait until it's recovered, and then we'll work out, what sort of common strategy is the best for that one. So it is a valid point, Gwen.
Yeah, so a really interesting balance. You're needing to remove ivy, for example, or scrub to prevent damage, but then the balance of how you then give prominence. We want people to access heritage in all manner of ways. It's just the right ways. And as you say, how we do that is a mass combination of how we do things. I think it's also really interesting, you touch on it in your report, but the way in which you've input to, for example, the Sustainable Farming Scheme consultation from an archaeological perspective, and the way in which you work with landowners, because obviously some sites are publicly accessible, some aren't. You've touched on it a little bit with your sort of comment on digital accessibility. I wonder whether there is any scope to offer virtual events to school inset days, for example. So staff training, inset days, quick and easy, a webinar, rather than having always to get people out in the field when we know money is tight for schools. The farming groups, WIs, community groups, other intersecting groups. In other words, getting that reach sort of beyond the schools. I'm not saying that people shouldn't get out, but it's that balance of, can one raise that awareness through that different virtual means. And we know how successful the Archaeology Day was, that had to be held online because of COVID. So that's an interest. I wonder about that one. And my second question was, I'm really interested to see the performance report, which is our next item, your case study on the First 1,000 Days project. And it's great to see the feedback that you're getting for that, which is really positive from people. It prompted me to think about whether the feedback is a little bit more forward-looking in terms of what people are getting as a message and learning, rather than simply the participants saying, oh, I'm looking forward to the next one you're arranging. In other words, prompting them to do more themselves rather than waiting for you to arrange something. So 2 questions there. One was virtual events, and the other is sort of getting feedback that prompts people to take action for themselves.
Yeah, so on the first one around virtual events, so things like, exactly, that is definitely possible, and we've done those sorts of things. So for example, when we've done the Heritage Watch work, you might have noticed we've done virtual training. We did a Dark Skies event a few years ago as well. That was virtual. So obviously we were doing that because of COVID, because that was the only way we could get the engagement. Archaeology Day, obviously with Archaeology Day now, all the videos we can put on are posted onto it was definitely something we can do. I think what I would have to do is work with the other officers. So for the education, potentially work with people like Tom Bean and work that out in terms of.
Yes.
I do know from
food for thought, ideas.
Yes, I would definitely like to keep increasing the engagement opportunities, and the things like the interpretation work, where we've created the 360 viewpoints. Potentially if a school has headsets, they can actually go to that site without actually having to be there. So we're definitely exploring them, and I will continue to work on that area as well with my colleagues.
That's super. Thank you very much. Anything else from anybody else? No, great. Well, can we warmly applaud and thank Thomas and colleagues for Thomas really for tremendous work done, a sheer resilience, tenacity, especially at scrub bashing, of which there seems to be an awful lot in there. And we know it's much in demand. We will also be keen to see your appearance of the Weatherman walking. Please let us know when it is, unless we've already missed it. Point us to it. Thank you. And I think for the minutes, Caroline, we've received, noted and taken a keen interest in the report. Grateful for the clarity it provides to our understanding. Diolch yn fawr, Thomas, and dy waith rhagorol iawn. Thank you for your really good work.
Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, that takes us on to the next item, which is Wellbeing Objective Performance Report, which starts on page 35. Maya Thomas, Performance and Compliance Coordinator. We all absolutely know Maya's excellent style and thoroughness. The reports are very clear, but as Maya will explain, this one's a new and beautiful butterfly of format for us. Focusing on our 4 C's, actually our 5 C's, because the corporate plan is in there too. Corporate plan, 4 C's, conservation, climate, connection, communities, which I think will all take us a while to get our heads around in the new format. Maya, would you like to introduce for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this performance report sets out the authority's performance against its 4 wellbeing objectives set out in our Corporate and Resources Plan 2023-24 to 2026-27. It outlines progress against priority indicators, projects, work programmes and internal development activities identified in the authority's delivery plans, which were approved in July. This is the first version of the revised performance report, so it is kind of in a bit of a new format. So if there's certain things that you're not sure on, please let me know and we'll try our best to kind of explain different aspects of it. It reports up to the 31st of December, and as a result, because it's a new report, it might be subject to some further revisions and improvements as we work our way through kind of taking this new approach. One of the kind of comments we had was that our performance reports in this area were too long. So one of the things we kind of realised that we could take out of it was some of the partnership working aspect of it. And our thought was that we will look at kind of partnership working through a new annual report, which will kind of outline, it'll be a partnership framework report that will then go to MPA. Those partnerships are being monitored on our performance system. So there is kind of ongoing monitoring, but we think it will give you a wider overreach kind of overview of a kind of partnership work in that area. A separate assurance monitoring report has been developed following discussion with the Chair of Audit and Corporate Services Committee, and so that covers some of the areas that previously you would have seen in the performance report relating to kind of our compliance, public and statutory duties, corporate improvement and planning performance. That report is only going to Audit and Corporate Services, but you are circulated the reports from that committee. That's because they very much interlink with the remit of that being our corporate Audit and Corporate Services, and to do with work that's happening around our new kind of risk-based approach. So you'll be seeing a paper that's going to MPA about our new risk policy, and so that kind of looks like that they'll all kind of nicely interlink in terms of this. Just to say, kind of in wider reporting, we did take on board that we had some interest in having thematic future performance committee, so looking at each of the individual C's, and so we'll be taking that forward for the next financial year, but we didn't have time to kind of implement that for this committee. So updates have been made to the performance reporting system to reflect data and information required for this report. There probably might be some further amendments that we need to do and some further review of some classifications of data in terms of that. Some RAG actions from the previous report have been carried forward where a project has been midway in delivery and it seems still relevant and might not have had specific reference in the delivery plan, but we felt that they still needed to be reported on. So the introduction report provides a summary of key developments across our wellbeing objectives. Some RAG actions are in amber or in green and say they haven't been started, but many of these actions are expected to progress from January onwards, particularly in terms of some of the items under connection, because there's quite a few in the kind of amber within that. So really, I'll open it up to members. Do you have any comments or questions or anything that you're not sure of within the new report? If our officer present can't answer, I'll get in contact with the relevant officer and get back to you.
Thank you, Maya. As ever, you give us such a lovely rounded view. I think it is important we all note that separate report has now been created for assurance monitoring covering compliance, public standard duties, etc., including planning performance, and that goes to audit and corporate services. I do sense that there is a sort of concern or a need for us to get our heads around that, to understand that apportionment of the features between ops and audit, and to make sure that it gets the appropriate governance sort of scrutiny, as it were. I think the report that we've got here, thank you for the reduction in volume. I think that's a really valuable thing, because otherwise it doesn't get the scrutiny. And we should also, given resources tightening, we as a body should also be looking at the way the reports we require of our officers should become lighter and more effective and efficient for them to do, as well as for us to scrutinise and to read. You know, it's a resource efficiency, I think, angle that we all need to pay attention to. I think I have a slight concern that it's a very green report with a smidge of amber. So I realise it's early days. Question that pings in my head is, are we setting ourselves enough in the way of challenge on some of those? But I agree, it's really early times. So we're learning. I think there is some generic points which I flagged separately to Maya. I think for ops review, given that we've got a new activities and event manager starting, it could be a useful one to bring into one of our Cs, whichever our C that best fits into, so that we get, as ops review values the opportunity to meet officers and hear their presentations. But let me open it out for comment, and then I can come back again. Gwyn.
There we are, my microphone's working. I was just interested, as I always am interested, about the development of the number of electric vehicle charging points and so on. And we have a statistic here on page 49 saying that for the previous year there were 5,500 charges taking place, and it's moved up to 7,000. And I'm just wondering, that statistic is fine, it's moving in the right direction, but how many charging points are we talking about, so we can know how much use each of these on average is making?
We are, of course, Gwyn, getting a separate report that's in the action log for a separate report to ourselves on electric charging. The one I mentioned, it would be good to get e-bikes on into as well. But yes, perhaps Maya, you'd like to just briefly pick up on that, because clearly we're going to get a fuller report following, aren't we?
What I'll do is for future reports, add in a bit more detail about how many it relates to, also stating this only relates to the ones on our car parks. So there are, the project involved also has supported other ones on PCC sites, I believe, as well. So this is just in terms of us, but I can add in future a bit more detail to give you a bit more how many it relates to, perhaps, in terms of that.
Tegrin, do you want to pick up something there?
Yeah, I can't exactly remember the number, but I think it's about 160, 170 points that we've got. What I think is quite significant is there's a map that is shared, and it highlights that actually Pembrokeshire have more points than any other county in Wales, which I keep expecting it not to be the case. There, because I assume others will catch up, but actually even so far we are really holding up and have a much better infrastructure, and that's entirely down to us, to be perfectly honest. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't us. But you know, I suppose the question for us is, what is where we can lever in the investment to build on what we've got already.
Gwyn, you're happy with that? Yes,
I think it's we need to have the information that we need, not just to make publicity out of it, but I think that's very impressive, Tegrin, that we're in the lead. It makes you wonder what's everybody's attitude is throughout Wales. probably a great deal of cynicism, thinking just keep our heads down and the storm will pass over us. Because at the moment, I can't see that rural areas will be well served.
Interesting, interesting point. And of course, our visitor economy will be massively leveraged by our availability of the confidence that we can give to those who, again, predominantly in the urban areas, but those from afar, for whom electric vehicles are absolutely their family transport and their everyday. So I think that's we've made an important strategic investment and decision there, and well done to the team and indeed the authority for having the vision to support that capital investment, as it were, and actually to Andrew Musket and the team also for actually getting it implemented, because as you say, the infrastructure is non-trivial, particularly in some of our more rural and outlying areas. Any other points that others want to pick up on? No, okay. I will just add that the comment from the observations from our colleague Julie James, who has expressed some concern about the way the apportionment between audit and ourselves. And I take the point, you're absolutely right. It's appropriate to give the data that should be scrutinised by the committee with that remit and expertise to that committee. You're quite right. We do get all circulated with the information. I think we might have to find a slightly better way of, in a sense, than just expecting everybody to kind of dive into all the papers and filter out the relevant bit. But I think that's a conversation to be had, and perhaps something that will come out of the discussions on our committee structures and terms in the light of the Audit Wales recommendations. Tegrin, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, just in passing, the link I've just put in is the map I was referring to, which highlights the local authority EV charging points. It doesn't actually say it
into the chat, right?
Into the click. No, I'm happy to have a chat with Julie. I think we need to, the changes I think have been welcome and improve things. I think I do like the assurance report, but actually it does really frighten me actually, and it just highlights the bureaucracy required to run a public organization these days. It is, if you will have looked at it there, and there are precious few people, myself, Catherine, who are essentially doing all this work there. So I think we also need to be mindful, as we mentioned, that there will be a change in the style of this committee. So while conceivably there's an imbalance between agendas at the moment, I don't actually expect that to be the case if we follow through on what is proposed for this committee.
Thank you.
The other bit I would say is, I think the model, which is fairly common, is committees deal with things and then they're reported to the authority. So there will, I take it, be an update on the assurance framework as part of the annual report. So it's not the case that members don't have it. It's just, it's not, from my point of view, it's not really prudent to be creating different reports or adding the same items onto multiple committees there. Yes. But I'm sure it won't be the last time we have that discussion.
No, and it does play to, I think, the point that we're all very sensitive to, of that efficiency of resource. Your resource in writing and preparing the reports, our effectiveness and efficiency in receiving and scrutinising them, and it's getting that balance of enough detail and making sure that we are sufficiently testing and challenging without simply just being box ticking, so that our test and challenge is useful and adds value rather than the opposite. And I think it'll be a bit of a journey, to coin the apocryphal phrase, to get it right, and something that, as you say, we'll get better at. But thank you very, very much. If nobody else has any questions, are we happy to suggest that we've received, noted, scrutinised the report? Yes, good. Thank you very much. Thank you again, as ever, and we'll see you again, I suspect. Thank you. I think luck is with us today. It stopped raining, and even though the IT isn't playing up, the IT is playing up, we're making good progress. So it gives me great pleasure now to welcome for item 6 our Dark Skies presentation, which is a separate item that was provided to us. Jamie Taylor, Dark Skies officer. Some of us had the pleasure of seeing this presentation at the SDF committee, so I was kind of doing a bit of a double take and wondering whether I'd lost my marbles, but it wasn't that. Caroline assured me, thank goodness. It's great that it's getting wider exposure here. It much deserves it. And I also noticed that, which I'm sure some of you have, the piece in the staff news on biofluorescent lichens in the authorities' biofluorescent night walk, for example, and indeed the comments that Thomas made referring to dark skies and archaeology. So, Jamie, without more ado, I think open floor to any questions, comments, and your presentation.
Diolch, Dr. Plummer, and bore da pawb. Shall I share my screen? Is that the best way to?
That would be great. Thank you.
There we go.
Right, we've got that.
There we are. Is that showing on the whole screen, or can you see what I can see?
We've still got next slide and any notes. Not that you've got any notes.
No.
So it's not on presentation view yet. No, we've still, that's interesting. We've still got the slides on the left. So you should be able to go from start.
Yeah.
Slideshow in the middle. So where your cursor's on the home should go on the top ribbon. You should, that's up a bit. You should go to slideshow in the middle of the grey ribbon. And then you should be able to go from start.
There we are.
Can't always see your cursor.
Right, okay, it's because it's coming up. I've got two screens. It's coming up on the other screen for some reason. Right, here we go. Let's go.
That's it, along a bit. That's it.
Yeah.
There you are. From beginning.
From beginning.
Left. That's it.
There we are. Can you see that now?
It should be coming in a minute. I don't think you've clicked from the beginning. It doesn't seem to have clicked. Interesting. Okay, well, let's go with the flow.
Yes, okay. There we are. Right. Very sorry about that. So I'll just begin with a quick overview of what we're trying to achieve in general terms. And the ultimate goal as far as dark skies is concerned is to eliminate any spillage of light above the horizontal from the point that's emitting it. So what that means in practical terms is any lights like these on the left-hand side that are labelled unacceptable and very bad, a certain amount of the light emitted from them is pointing directly up into the sky. This wastes energy, it costs money, it makes the stars less visible, and it can have a detrimental effect on wildlife and people as well. So that's what we're trying to do, is trying to reduce the amount of that wasted light. So this is a case study of Loggerheads National Park. My colleague Danny Robertson in Ururi did this last year. And you can quite clearly see from the image on top that although at first appearance you might think it's well lit, it's got a lot of these bright floodlights, it's quite evident that even though there are bright lights, there are dark spots, which obviously can enable crime and undesirable behaviour. The light shines onto the green areas to the left-hand side, which again is having an effect on the wildlife there. And visibility is actually quite poor because the lights are blinding. In contrast to the image below, after the retrofit project was done, you can see that the light is amply lighting the path for access to the buildings, but it's not leaking into the surrounding area and it's not causing a pollution problem. When I first began this role, there was discussion around whether or not Pembrokeshire Coast National Park should be applying for a dark sky designation, as some of our colleagues in North Wales have done. Pembrokeshire has a very unique geography, which means that this is not perhaps the best approach for us. We could select the darker areas as on the slide and congratulate ourselves for having some very dark areas. But the towns and particularly the industrialised area around the waterway present an enormous challenge to try and reduce the amount of light leaking from there, and to try and seek accreditation when there's such a large amount of work still to do seemed rather disingenuous, if you like. So the approach that we have decided to take is to try and lead from the front. We've recently received consultancy reports that look at the lighting on our own buildings. We've also had reports on some buildings belonging to partners, the National Trust and Pembrokeshire County Council, and we're getting retrofitting projects underway to basically try and demonstrate to the larger industrial players that we can do this, we will make a difference. Every light that we change is improving the situation, so in a sense it doesn't matter where we start. But I think it makes a very compelling argument if we demonstrate that we're committed to it to begin with, then hopefully others will follow suit in future. I've mentioned there on the slide that we've secured some funding from the Sustainable Tourism Fund to make the retrofitting changes to our own properties. Those reports are now in, and we're beginning the process of meetings and consulting other organisations like CADU, who will have an input into, obviously some of our buildings are quite sensitive and we've got considerations like bats and various other things that have to be thought about before we actually make the changes. But we're on course to get the bulk of that work done this coming year. There we go. Project Norse is another. It's an all Wales project. It's another facet that I'm working on. The consultancy reports that we had done on our own buildings were conducted alongside this project, which represented something of a saving. Project Norse are focusing on the wider community. So as it says, we've got contracts out now for Ysgol Penrhyn Dewi. The lighting changes there were welcomed with open arms, and we're hopefully about to begin making those physical changes within the next few weeks. The Stackpole Centre, it mentions there, the National Trust have been very gracious in accepting our support, and we've agreed with them that we'll supply new light fittings that are more appropriate as per the report, and the National Trust have agreed to contribute for their part that they will do the installation of those lights within the next 12 months, which represents a significant contribution from them, and is brilliant to see how how partners are supporting this project as well. So obviously retrofitting is great. It solves the problem that's already there. But what it doesn't do is look to new development in the future. Currently, there's very little control within development management. There's very little control over what lighting can and can't be installed on new developments. So we've established, or I'm part of, an All Wales working group who are looking to adopt some of the better existing SPGs that are out there, and develop that into a guide, a good practice guide that local authorities can integrate into their planning considerations, and should try and prevent the problem before it happens. So the overall effect is hopefully that we'll see this map provided to us by NRW. We hopefully should see these bright spots start to diminish. So this slide was obviously written a couple of months ago. We conducted 2 events as part of Dark Skies Week, which was the week of half term in February. They were very well attended. Dr. Plummer mentioned the biofluorescent night walk that we had. It was fantastic and very engaging. There were 15 members of the public attended, which was the maximum the maximum the guide would allow us, and it sold out within a day of going on the website. I think it was very keenly taken up. Because Sarah, our events coordinator, had only started in role recently, we set up these events quite hastily. And even though there was nothing planned at all a fortnight before Dark Skies Week, we still managed to sell out both events. The other event was a storytelling evening conducted at Castell Henllys. 40 members of the public attended that. And we had a professional storyteller by the name of Alice Cavoisier, who took us around the world and explained some of the mythology behind where the stars in the night sky might have come from. She began in New Zealand and moved around South America, and a lot of us are more familiar with the perhaps the Greek and Roman stories. And it was a great piece of engagement as well, because the event was supposed to run that we would have the storytelling first, and then we'd move outside and there'd be some stargazing. But on that evening, it was pouring torrential rain. We had complete cloud cover. But we took everybody outside and I asked that they turn their torches off. And the effect was instant. I said that you can see that the night sky isn't dark. And because of the cloud cover, it was quite amazing. The sky was a deep blue or grey colour, and even from Castell Henllys, you could quite clearly see the bright areas over Fishguard and Cardigan in the distance. You know, it was a really nice illustration of what the problem is and how it affects us. So, like I said, we're very hastily organised those events this year, and Sarah did a fantastic job of publicising it and organising it. And we look to Dark Skies Week next year, where we hope to run an event on each evening of the Dark Skies Week.
Brilliant.
And I think that's it from me. I'm open to questions, and I'll do my best to now stop sharing my screen.
Yes, that's always the challenge. Jamie, thank you very much indeed for taking us through that. Oh gosh, it's scary. I'm seeing myself double now. That's even scarier. Thank you very much for that really neat encapsulation of the way that you've taken this role already and got your knees well under the desk. You know, that breadth from helping us as a national park to be a leader, show our leadership, to work with others, National Trust, schools, etc. So I think that's brilliant. Good practical retrofitting examples, Lanyon, you know, as a start, and the bonus of that being carbon and cost effective too, if one gets the implementation. I think many of us have been sensitive through the Development Management Committee on, actually, I think we're pretty good at constantly going on about what's the lighting condition. However, you're quite right, to have an SPG, which is more technical and more effective, would be really, really helpful, because it'll give a much tighter constraint. I think from a personal perspective, looking at Pembrokeshire, the bit that always worries me, especially, is the coastal bit and the impact, as we know, of marine lighting, or these very large glazed atrium windows now, which are unscreened, going out to the sea, and the importance of our migrating birds, for example, and the impact on them. But we all know that changing shipping regulations and the balance of health and safety is perhaps a bigger ask than we're quite up to. But we should still keep it in our minds. Gwyn.
Thank you. Jamie, just a simple question. You outlined the projects happening at the Skull Penrhyn Dewi and the Stackpole Centre, and it said also Key Cottages. Where are Key Cottages located?
So the Key Cottages are part of the Stackpole estate. Yeah, they're a group of properties on the Stackpole estate. The biggest group of properties there is the Stackpole Centre, but we've looked at the estate in its entirety, which is good from our point of view, because it covers a huge land area. It was. But perhaps to call it an easy win is perhaps a bit disingenuous, but we were able to get very good value for money then in that area, if that makes sense.
Yes, well, I was very pleased to see how much involvement the National Trust had in this. It's the kind of thing that they'd be right up their street, so
yes.
Keep pushing them. Excellent. Talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Any questions or points from anybody else? No. Well, thank you, Jamie, very much indeed for the way you're taking this forward. I think it's really exciting. That storytelling sounded absolutely brilliant, and well done at the 11th hour for the events coordinator and yourself getting that launched. I mean, I think darkness is something which is such an opportunity for us with our tourism entry too. Of course, height of summer might not be the time to flag it, but actually you can still create those opportunities for learning about the darkness. And of course, the Eastern half terms, the October Easter half terms, still have enough night, at least, to engage many of the young fry. I realise that some of us, Reese, will be into a different form of nightlife, clearly from where you're sitting, your backdrop at the moment. But thank you very much. We welcome hearing a great deal more about the successes and your success in working with other partners. So unless we've anything else for Jamie, I think that takes us to the end of the scheduled items. I'd just like to make one remark. It's not actually on the agenda per se. Thank you very much, Jamie. But I would like to remark on the draft report that was circulated to members about the Sustainable Farming Scheme consultation response from PCMPA, or collaboratively across the parks, which I think really excellent collaboration with the designated landscapes, and of course things like dark sky and archaeology. Some of our key elements we've spoken about today and our performance with projects play into that, the way in which we work with landowners. So now no further questions. We seem to have finished. Wedi gorffen, wedi cwpla, wedi benni, whichever phrase is the most appropriate, Tegwyn. I don't know which one you choose to use. The lot. We're done. We've finished. So once again, many thanks indeed to all the officers presenting and supporting the meeting, all of you for participating and contributing. It means we can get off and have that cup of coffee, and I very much hope our Democratic Services team will do so too. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.